Evening all. Well, if you're the person who's taken over Sargon of Akkad's This Week in Stupid, then this week has provided you with rich pickings. Where do we start? With use of the word womukson, that you can now self-identify as a woman to get into a woman's prison, and then commit the kind of crimes that got you sent to a man's prison in the first place. Or you could be like my old university, the University of Kent, which is academically very good, but its student union has, bless them, never been the sharpest tool in the box. You see, this week, the university student union has decided to ban cowboy costumes from its list of acceptable fancy dress outfits that you can wear at student events. Yes, along with Nazis and nuns, the cowboys. You can't dress as one because you might offend a Native American or First Nation student. Not that there's ever been a Native American or First Nation student at the University of Kent, but it's the thought that counts. You see, the union was always like this back in my day. They would try and raise money to buy tampons to send to female Swapo guerrillas so that during their time of the month they could keep fighting the South African army over Southwest Africa. And they were always doing things like banning Guns N' Roses from performing at the university, as if Guns N' Roses would ever perform at the University of Kent. But it's the point, it's the principle that counts. And this got me thinking about my old university and the way the student union used to operate. It was a crooked bunch back then, and it looks like it's the same crooked and dumb bunch now. The names might be different, the individuals just slightly different, but the mentality is still very much the same, by all accounts. Now, I'm going to relate to you a story that happened back in my time when I was at the campus. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking about, we've seen a lot of the dark heart of the left. If you've been watching the story about the Antifa protesters taking over the streets of Portland and the Democrat mayor not wanting to do a thing about it, he's just allowing Antifa to take over the streets of Portland. Or we have a look at the hysterical reactions to Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation. I know that's a very hot button topic for people, but I keep coming back to the point I've been making on social media, which is you've got to follow the evidence and see what is credible. And if it doesn't stand up, due process takes over. But to hell with due process with some of these people. And you just think about it. There's a dark heart to the left. Jordan Peterson explained it so well when he said on the right, we know what is unacceptable on the right because there's a big, thick wall. And once you start crossing the wall between the mainstream right wing and the part of the right that's commonly associated with Nazism and fascism, so when the right decides to embrace racist policies, militaristic and expansionist policies, and when it becomes anti-Semitic, and when it starts disposing of democracy, then you know the right has crossed the line. And there's never been a dividing line on the left. The left don't have at this point, our opinions become unacceptable, as unacceptable as the Nazis and the fascists on the right. The left, even the moderate left, will not disavow the communists. And that thick dividing line between acceptable left-wing thought and unacceptable left-wing thought has not been found. And you think, well, what is the effect of this? That they haven't put a wall? Well, what it's doing is you can see the effect on the Democrat Party in America and the Labour Party in Britain. That the dark centre, the part that just wants to destroy everything, destroy our language, destroy our ability to communicate with each other, destroy our ability to try and reason with each other, even if we have different points of view. They want to destroy civility. They want to destroy language. They want to destroy everything, the family, men, white people, white women. They just want to set everybody against each other. And you just think, well, who on the mainstream moderate left is saying no? And that is why you don't get this problem on the right. The far right, the fascist right, is not a whirlpool sucking everything in to its core. it is a kind of that there is this dividing line where the mainstream right have turned their backs on the fascists and Nazis and have done for decades now. But on the left, it is a vortex. It's a whirlpool that is sucking the moderates in. Whenever people say, look, with all this anti-Semitism in the British Labour Party, why doesn't somebody on the moderate side, why doesn't Yvette Cooper or Chuck Romano stand up and say something? Why don't they challenge Jeremy Corbyn? They don't. They get sucked into his thought process, or not just Corbyn's thought process, but the thought process of the ideological hard left that are controlling the narrative, the ones that sit round and think, what is the next point of outrage? What is the next thing that needs dismantling in society? And why is this? Well, as I said, I'm going to relate this to a story that happened during my time at the University of Kent. Now, when I was a fresher there, I got to meet. Well, I joined the Conservative students back then, not because I was very politically active. It's just that it was a great way of meeting people. It was one of the largest societies on campus at that time, and it had a lot of fun, clever people, and a lot of attractive women as well. That didn't go unnoticed back then, but. So I was a young Conservative student, and I met my kind of opposite numbers. A couple of freshers who were from the Labour Club, and they were nice, decent guys. We'd have meals together. We'd just perhaps have a coffee together, in one of the canteens. And it was nice. And, even though we differed on issues, we could talk about them in a civilized manner. But that changed over time. Now, these two guys, I'm not going to give you their full names, but they were called Paul and Andy. And Paul was a very earnest young man from the north of England. He cared deeply about issues, but he was a decent guy. Andy was a lot more middle class. He would, I would imagine, have been kind of one of the a Blairite. I don't know if he carried on with his political activities after university, but certainly he was more of the social democrat left, more so than Paul. And he was a nice, tall, handsome, charming chap. The girls liked him. Paul was very earnest, bookish. A little bit like the Tom Courtenay character from Dr. Zhivago before he becomes a rabid hardline communist, but that idealistic side early on in the film. But what happened was that when we were freshers, the three student sabbatical officers in charge of the student union, so that was the general secretary, the president, and the treasurer, were not Labour. So for years, the Labour Club and the Socialist Worker Party on campus controlled the union and the three sabbatical officers. And then one year, in the late 80s, the student body rebelled, broke the mould, and elected two Liberals and a Conservative to the sabbatical jobs. Now, they won the election. They took office during the summer holidays, and then 2 weeks into the next academic year, the Labour Club and the Socialist Workers got together and put in a motion of no confidence against them. It didn't take long. They were in the job for a few weeks, and already there was a motion of no confidence. And the reasons given were really flimsy. Was that their attempts to support certain radical causes, like the Labour and the Socialist Workers put in a lot of radical ideas. I said the tampons for SWAPO. That was one of them. And these, of course, two Liberals and a Conservative were just very lukewarm. Okay, the motion may have been passed, but they weren't enthusiastic. So that was grounds to no confidence to them, allegedly. Also, I remember with the treasurer, the Conservative guy, he was playing pool with some friends in one of the common rooms, and a coin got stuck in the pool table, and he managed to get a free go, a second go for free because the coin was stuck. And the Labour Club charged that this was dishonest of the student union treasurer, and he should be no confidence because of it. So anyway, there was a record turnout. Normally, a union general meeting would get between 50 and 100 people. This one got between 700 and 900 people. I mean, drawing this from memory here. And a lot of normie students turned up to see what it was about, and they were so appalled by the antics of the hard left students that they thought it was all nonsense, and they voted against the motion of no confidence, and the sabbatical officers stayed in. Now, the Labour Club could have just sat back and said, fair enough, we just wait, it's only a year, we just wait for the next election cycle and we'll put out strong candidates. But no, they didn't do that. Within 2 weeks, they got signatures, they got a petition going to get an extraordinary general meeting held to no confidence the sabbatical officers again. And all you needed was about 50 signatures to trigger an extraordinary general meeting. They originally said it was an emergency general meeting until somebody pointed out it's not emergency what they were asking for. So they changed it to extraordinary general meeting. And that was because there was a protest in London that they organised. And I think the issue was abortion. I think this was around about the time of the Liberal Democrat MP David Alton putting in a bill, a motion to, I think it was reduce the time when somebody could have an abortion. So it was very kind of pro-life policy. And so there was a protest in London, and the President and the General Secretary, James and Rohan, I think they informed the authorities of the route the march would take. And of course, to the Labour and Socialist workers, you don't cooperate with the authorities at all, because they reserve the right to go down any street with the protest that they like and perhaps kick off at some point. And the two sabbatical officers were too conciliatory with the authorities, so they had to go, apparently. And so the trick was, with the Labour Club, there's that they contrived to have this extraordinary general meeting. Now, when they asked the students, they went round with a petition form saying we need signatures for an extraordinary general meeting. They did not tell the normies what the meeting was going to be about. So they didn't say, oh, we're going to have another no confidence motion in the sabbatical officers. They withheld that information from normie students so that the normies go, oh, an extraordinary meeting, I suppose, what harm can it do? And so they just signed away. But the union only, well, when I say the union, the Labour Club and the Socialist workers only got the bare minimum of signatures that they needed for this meeting. So anyway, they held the meeting, and they held the meeting on a Friday during the day, during lecture time. So normie students on a Friday were either in their lectures or they'd gone home for the weekend. And of course the hard left mobilised, and the motion of no confidence passed, and 2 of the 3 sabbatical officers went. James and Rohan, President and General Secretary, and were booted out. And it was a con job. It was a complete fit up. I mean, there was nothing honest about that extraordinary general meeting whatsoever. And I know because I witnessed it all, and I saw behind the scenes of what happened. I sat in on a Labour Club meeting, I sat at the back, and I saw the plan being hitched. You know, how they devised the plan and how on message everybody had to be. And I know how dishonest that was. And I confronted Paul and Andy about this after the meeting. I said that was shoddy. That was absolutely shoddy. And Paul, his attitude was, no, we had good reasons, we had grounds. And it pained him to say these words to me. You know, I could see he was struggling with his conscience when I confronted him about this shoddy trick that the Labour Club, the Labour Club he was an active member of. And it pricked his conscience. But tribal loyalty won out. Now, Andy, he actually ended up a couple of years later becoming the treasurer, a sabbatical officer and treasurer. And I remember he used to butt heads with the Labour Club all the time. They wanted to spend money on all these great political causes. And of course, they had the ultra vires prohibition in the union constitution, which meant that the union couldn't endorse or spend money on certain very radical causes. And he tried to fight the corner for a while. And The knives were out. He kept his job though, because he was Labour Club. He was establishment. But they were doing things like that all the time at Kent, the Labour Club. You had something called the Standing Orders Committee, who was supposed to be apolitical. You couldn't be a member of a political party on campus and be on the Standing Orders Committee, because their job was to monitor student union elections and also chair union general meetings. So it had to be absolutely fair. That was the theory. But what would happen is that the Labour Club would get some of their members, get them to drop out of the Labour Club for 12 months, go on the Standing Orders Committee, whereupon mysteriously anybody on a conservative or right-leaning political worldview, if they spoke at a union general meeting, suddenly they wouldn't get their full 2 or 3 minutes to make their pitch. It would always come in under about 30 seconds, and they'd be constantly interrupted, please stay on the topic. And when they were staying on the topic, but to try and interrupt their flow, the chairperson, Standing Orders Committee, would interrupt them. And of course, they counted the votes. And I'm not going to say, I don't have any proof that voting was rigged at Kent, but it makes you wonder that the Labour Party had infiltrated the Standing Orders Committee to such a huge extent. And of course, they got rewarded, the people who dropped down, because they would become a senior union official the year later. So it was all a con job. And I saw that and many more things at the Labour Club and the Socialist Worker Group at the University of Kent between 1987 and 1991 did. But I saw the effect it had on nice guys, nice sort of moderate left guys, but they had to stick with the party line. The dark heart, the vortex, was just sucking them in. And it was, it was a problem then. And it's interesting to know, I don't know what's happened to Paul and Andy since graduation. I haven't seen them or heard from them. But it turned out one of the other members of the Labour Club became notorious a few years ago, because one of them was the person that suggested to bury bad news on the day of the Queen Mother's funeral. It was that person, if you remember that story. I was at university with them. Yep, they were part of the Dirty Tricks Committee. Well, it wasn't really a committee, but it was a part of a, it was a Dirty Tricks group. They were part of it. So, yeah, if my message to anyone on the left is be truthful, keep your integrity, don't let the vortex get you. It's not worth. Victory at all costs is not a victory. If you have to sacrifice truth and integrity to get what you want, and find that dividing wall. And if you want to know, I've got a theory on where the dividing wall between the moderate acceptable left and the hard unacceptable left should be. If you want to know more, why don't you talk to me? Okay, until then, I might see you some other time over this weekend, but if not, have a good one. I'll see you soon. Bye.